lab reference ranges and lab testing is one way to rule in or out a disease condition. It doesn't say that you're normal and there's nothing that you can change though. And I think that's been a miscommunication or a barrier for a lot of people because in our conventional system, there isn't the time to sit and explain that. It's not how they're paid. It's just not set up in that way at all, which is very unfortunate because we do then have a massive general population who are sitting with their symptoms, unsure what to do. They've been told your labs are normal. So then they're like, okay, well, if my labs are normal, but my body doesn't feel normal, and my doctor, my gynecologist, whoever I just saw, didn't offer me any type of help, then what do I do? That needs to be like a bigger conversation when we talk about this stuff, because when we're talking about hormone balances, estrogen, progesterone, I'm talking about the balance of the estrogen with the progesterone. And it's not just estrogen on its own. That is kind of useless.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be? Into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. Today I have on the show Dr. Annie Savage, and Dr. Annie is a naturopathic doctor with a focus on women's health, and she teaches women how to heal their digestion and naturally balance their hormones so they don't suffer from the most common period symptoms every month. She is literally called the period doctor on TikTok, and that's what we're talking about today. I know we've talked about hormones, we've talked about your cycle, but Dr. Annie is specifically talking about your period today, what your hormones are doing throughout the month that leads up to your period, and then what these common symptoms mean in our period and how we can heal ourselves so that our period doesn't just totally disrupt our life. She's going to dive into her 4 pillars of health and how these pillars can affect our period and the actual menstruation part of your period, and how these, she goes through this list of common symptoms and what these different symptoms mean as far as imbalances in the body and what we can do about it. She is going to give you lots of takeaways here on how to live your life where you're not living according to when your period is about to start. So lots of good things to take away from. Let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Dr. Annie, and we are talking all things period today. She is the period doctor. After all, y'all can go find her on TikTok, the period doctor. And we were talking before we started recording how, all of y'all who've been listening for a while, you're at least familiar with kind of the parts of your cycle, right? We've talked about luteal phase and follicular phase and all that, but we haven't really honed in on your period. And so Dr. Annie is here today to talk about, a symptom-free cycle, which sounds like heaven for a lot of y'all. So I think this is a really good topic. So thanks so much for joining me today, Dr. Annie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So can you give us kind of the rundown of textbook definition of what is a normal period? What does a normal period look like?
Yes. So if we were to open up our old textbook and give you the exact definition, a normal period cycle, so from period day 1 of 1 month to period day 1 of your next month, the quote unquote normal amount of time would be 21 to 35 days. So there is some leeway in there. The most common for women is actually 28 to 30 days, but we do accept 21 to 35. The amount that you should be bleeding for time would be 3 to 7 days. So if you're bleeding only 1 or 2 days, we might think you have lower hormones in your body. And if you're bleeding for longer than 7 days, then we also think that there's a potential issue there. The blood should not have any large clots in it. You are shedding a uterine lining, so shredded pieces of tissue would be absolutely normal. However, clots that are, we always use money in my office when we're talking about the size, larger than a quarter is what we consider too big. So if you have a very clotty period, that would also be a problem. And if you are the bleeding too heavily, so that flow of bleeding, if you are bleeding too much, that would be changing a pad, tampon, filling a cup within an hour. So that would be too much. If you're doing that, then that's a lot of blood, and we want to stop that essentially. Those are, I think, the most most parameters that I can think of right away when we talk about kind of that textbook period. It's the length of bleeding, the flow or the heaviness of that bleeding, and then the frequency at which you're actually getting your cycle. So that would be your textbook period.
Yeah. Okay. So so you mentioned, if it's super light, then it would mean you probably have like lower end of the hormone spectrum. So what are the other signs you're talking about? Like what could be some reasons? So like if you're talking about the clotting. So like what could that potentially mean if you're having a lot of the clots?
Sure. So large clots in your period blood can indicate some hormonal imbalance. So usually we think of a low progesterone profile if we're seeing really big clots. Another reason you may see clots is if you have like fibroids, growths, cysts, that can be a sign of it as well. What happens, like your period blood shouldn't actually be clotting because it's a tissue lining. You're not bleeding like a regular cut. But what can happen is if that blood is pooled on top of your cervix before it's able to come out, we can get some bigger clots. And then we have the hormonal imbalances as well that can lead to the clotting.
That makes sense. And then what about for the heavy bleeding that you were talking about? Yeah. What could that be?
So heavy bleeding can be related again to hormonal imbalance. That's probably the phrase I say like a million times a day. That one is actually can be related to a higher estrogen compared to a normal or a low progesterone. And I want to mention that when we talk about hormone imbalance and when we talk about these levels of estrogen, progesterone in our body, many women will say, oh, I've had testing and my doctor, my whoever says it's normal. So, what does that mean then? Or what do I do then if our conventional system is like, yeah, you're normal, kind of go away or whatever. There's nothing we can do.
Yep.
The way that we look at labs and blood work is quite different outside of our conventional system. I'm a naturopathic doctor, so we are trained to look at it in more of optimal ranges versus just our lab reference ranges. And I also want to point out that I look at your health as an entire spectrum. So if at one end we have this like optimal, beautiful, healthy, easygoing, my body does everything I need it to, life and health. And at the other end of the spectrum, we're getting close to death. In between those things, we're going to have conditions and disease conditions. And so lab reference ranges and lab testing is one way to rule in or out a disease condition. It doesn't say that you're normal and there's nothing that you can change though. And I think that's been a miscommunication or a barrier for a lot of people because in our conventional system, there isn't the time to sit and explain that. It's not how they're paid. It's just not set up in that way at all, which is very unfortunate because we do then have a massive general population who are sitting with their symptoms, unsure what to do. They've been told your labs are normal. So then they're like, okay, well, if my labs are normal, but my body doesn't feel normal, and my doctor, my gynecologist, whoever I just saw, didn't offer me any type of help, then what do I do?
Right.
And that needs to be like a bigger conversation when we talk about this stuff, because when we're talking about hormone balances, estrogen, progesterone, I'm talking about the balance of the estrogen with the progesterone. And it's not just estrogen on its own that is kind of useless.
It really is. Yeah, I agree.
Unless it's like wildly outside of the reference range, then you'd be like, wow, something's happening here. But when we're looking at that value on its own without being able to compare it to its progesterone best friend, it doesn't give us much information.
Yeah.
So that is really the nuanced detail that goes into looking at this type of blood work and trying to help women, because obviously not everyone has like a disease condition. They don't fit into this box label that the insurance company can pay for. That's the problem.
That's so true.
We're all on this spectrum, and you may not have the lab test saying that you're in that box yet. But if you leave it without doing any type of treatment, like you might get there, not that that's a goal, but then you're offered the treatment in the conventional world.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a gray area at this point, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with you about the labs. I run functional labs on my clients, and I find like when people tell me like, oh yeah, they've had my doctor checked my estrogen levels. And I'm like, what good does that do? Like, why don't you know your estrogen levels? Like that doesn't help me at all. Like I need to see the whole picture. Like, I find that so wild that a doctor would just check estrogen. Like, what? Like, so
And
useless.
There's also a lot of miscommunication with some practitioners saying, oh, there's no point in checking your labs. Your hormones change so much that we're not going to check.
Yes.
And it's like, they're not swinging high and low in the day.
Right.
If they are, we would know.
Yeah, exactly. No kidding. No kidding.
So that bit of information also, it just doesn't really make any type of sense.
No, it doesn't. And I like the way you said that we don't fit into like the box that the insurance company pays for, because I feel like, and it is unfortunate in the way the medical system is set up because I must answer that question every other day. And it's different for you. I think it's probably different for you as a naturopathic doctor, but like, I don't take nothing I do is covered by insurance. Right. And it's hard to have that conversation with you, because I get it. I get that. And everybody can spend, a couple $1,000s to work with a functional specialist. And I get that, but it's hard because like you saying, like, it's like, well, the other option is we wait until we do fit into that box the insurance company is going to pay for. Well, then now you've got like 28 problems instead of just 2. And so now.
Exactly.
And then, like you said, we're kind of in the cycle of, well, now I'm having to, deal with it in the conventional way. And you're just passed around from doctor to doctor dealing with your symptoms and never really getting to the root cause of what's going on. So yeah, I agree with all that you're saying. Okay. So when we're talking about our period, I'm sure you hear about this the most because this is like your area of expertise, but people come to you and they're like, oh, like, I have normal symptoms. And then they start telling you your symptoms and you're like, holy crap, this is not normal. Like, what are the symptoms that you hear about the most? And I guess just explain this to our listeners, like, people think is normal and it's definitely not normal.
Absolutely. So what people think is normal is that you're in a level of pain that you require medication. So in our general population, female brain mind, when we have our period, it's normal. It's expected to need Tylenol, Advil, Midol, like whatever your drug of choice is. So normal to medicate ourselves or have that level of pain. The clotting is also overlooked. And some women don't actually know to look at the blood. So that's, again, probably our Western culture of not paying attention to our bodies very closely.
Right.
Acne. So acne with our period is so common that women also are like, yeah, I don't really get acne just with my period.
Yes.
It's normal.
Yes.
And it's like, well, you don't have to. The energy crash with our period. Also, it'd be normal to feel some fluctuation, some difference, but not to the point where you're laying in bed. You can't go out with your friends. You can't go to work, like that kind of thing. Any symptom that is disrupting your quality of living, your life, your productivity, your relationships is not normal. And we've been kind of gaslit to believe that that's okay. Deal with it. Just cry in bed for a day. It's
Take
okay.
some Midol. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are not normal, yet very, very accepted for most of the women that I speak to, unfortunately. Yeah. And then PMS is kind of another story on its own, because even if people get diagnosed with PMDD, that very severe version of PMS, they're not offered any type of treatment. I've had patients be offered Ativan, which is a really strong benzodiazepine. Their doctor
PMDD?
Said, their doctor just said, here, take this, the week before you get your period every month, and that'll help you get through
oh my God,
that period.
What are we doing to people?
So those intense mood swings, like causing a fight with your partner, breaking up with your partner, like that extreme mood, emotional dysregulation is also not normal. Migraine headaches also wouldn't be normal with every single cycle. And that is directly related to your hormones. I think those are kind of the top contenders for, I just deal with these type of symptoms.
Yeah.
And I was treated the exact same way.
Yeah.
I had a period from absolute hell when I was a teenager.
Same.
And I think my mom must have too, because she was like, take your Tylenol. You got to go to basketball. Like you got stuff to
live
do.
your life. Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, I'm laying on the floor in the fetal position. And I remember as well, once my grandma was over and she was like, well, just put on a thick pair of underwear, wear a pad. Like you got to go to, I don't know if it was a practice or a game or what I had, but it's very much coming from those generations.
Yes.
And I kind of think it comes from when, like, say when my grandma was going to a doctor, there was probably only male doctors or a lot more male doctors than female doctors.
Yes.
So at that time, if you can picture our grandmothers going in and saying, this is horrible. My cramps are so bad. I can't finish whatever I'm trying to do. And these male doctors being like, oh, okay, take some Tylenol, like, go away.
You can't be that bad.
And and it's just, it seems to have really trickled down through all of our generations and our women.
So true.
And I hear that as well when women say, you know, they list out their symptoms and then they go, oh, but my mom has it too. So that's why. And there is part of that because you grew up in your mom's house, you ate her food more than likely, you have a similar lifestyle. So parts of that are going to be not genetic, but passed down in an epigenetic kind of lifestyle way. But the way that our body functions and reacts with our cycle is much more to do with our lifestyle and our overall health than our mom or, you know, our genetic makeup.
Yeah. And then do you have experience? Maybe this is your own experience and this is mine because similar to you, I had just like the period from hell when I was a teenager and just like, it was just terrible. And, you know, we go to the doctor and then they give you the birth control. Like, I don't know if that was your experience, but I'm sure you have that experience working with women who that's the doctor's solution, right? Is birth control. And then you have to kind of deal with that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So that is, I see that a lot, obviously, help women come off the pill a lot. I'll have some women who come in specifically who are on the pill and they're terrified to try to come off. Because, you know, they had this period from hell that you and I had. They've been put on the pill at, let's say, 16. And scarily, that's becoming younger and younger and younger of how old we're putting these girls on the pill.
Yes.
But they come in and they say, either I'm too afraid to come off because I'm afraid of what I'll experience again. Or they might say, I have come off, but it was too hard. Everything went too bad, too chaotic. So I went back on. And from my understanding, from all the feedback that I hear with patients, it's because that's their only choice. And it's coming from the gynecologist, the medical doctor, whoever in our conventional world that's saying birth control, your only choice for fibroids, birth control, for cysts, birth control, PCOS, birth control, like weight gain, birth control, irregularity, heavy bleeding, literally any symptom associated with being a woman, birth control. Acne. Sometimes antidepressants.
That's very true.
And that's the other also quite scary or sad treatment is just being kind of handed birth control and antidepressants like they're candy and like there aren't side effects. And I think, or I know also part of the fear with women, especially after they've come off the pill, if they've come off by themselves and they don't really know what to do and they go back to their doctor, the only answer they get, of course, is, well, go back on. That's your only choice. And then they just don't know what to do. Because if they had a bad experience on the pill, then they're like, I can't go back on. That was that was worse than my period now. And there are a lot of women who react to birth control. They just cannot take it. They're sensitive to it. And usually the words that they say is, I was nuts. I was crazy. They emotionally and mentally act completely different. And usually someone in their life will say like, that's not working for you. You got to come off. And sometimes they play around with it. They may try one or two, but if you're reacting that heavily to a synthetic hormone, it generally happens with any of them. So there's a lot of fear around the conversation of being put on or coming off or what are my other options? Because so many women just don't know. And part of the symptoms that we get when we're on the pill is actually because of what the pill is doing. So it depletes a lot of our nutrients that we need. And it's forcing our body to make less hormones because we're giving it to our body, but they're synthetic. So they don't look exactly like the hormones in our body. And so it causes just different issues in different areas. A whole other set of problems.
Well, and like you said, I see the same thing with a lot of my clients or the fear of getting off of it, but also like, and this is, I feel like this is unfortunate too, but it's also the fear of like having to tell their doctor that they're getting off of it because either they've had a doctor that's been so adamant about like, you need to be on the pill. Like this is the only thing that's going to help. Or like you're saying, like, they're not giving any of that's literally the only option that they're given. And so there's fear around that too. It's like, well, what do I tell my doctor? Like, well,
definitely. And they're Totally. They're afraid of the conversation.
Yep.
Like I've seen that as well, where they literally think their doctor is going to get angry with them,
Right.
yell at them, like fire them as a patient.
Yeah.
So fear is probably the biggest feeling concern around it, around the pill. And that's why these types of conversations are great, just to say, like, there is another choice. There is another option. It's just, we got to be louder and bigger to get to the people in the back.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and like I said, I had an episode a couple weeks ago where I was just talking about like exercise during different parts of your cycle. And I was saying like how different our lives would have been as teenagers if we would have known stuff. First of all, I was like, I didn't know anything about my cycle. Like, I mean, I knew I had a period, like that was about the extent of it. But like, we're not taught about our bodies. Like, we're not taught about how our cycle works. We're not taught about like the changes that happen throughout the cycle and the phases. Like, we're not taught any of that. So I just feel like if we could teach our daughters and, you know, the young girls that are starting out with like they're in puberty and all that, like, I feel like we could really change the next generation and there, because the other piece, and you might see this too, I'm sure you see this too. I feel like you can't overlook the amount of depression, postpartum depression, infertility, PCOS, all these things happening to women who are coming from just this generation. I say our generation, I'm imagining we're around the same age of where birth control is handed out like candy. And that, I mean, every friend I had was on birth control. And the reason was because they had a terrible period or they wanted their acne to go away. But it's like, I feel like you can't overlook, like there has to be a correlation there that you can't overlook, like this increased evidence of all of these hormonal things going on with this generation of women from like 30 to 45, because we've just been pumped full of these synthetic hormones that are, like you're saying, causing a whole other set of problems.
Yeah, I see that a lot in practice as well, especially the fertility aspect.
Yeah.
And women trying to get pregnant now in their early, mid, late 30s with a lot more difficulty than we've seen in the past. Unfortunately, when you look up scientific research on that, shockingly, the studies are like, no effect on fertility. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe there's no statistical significance to it according to their studies.
Right.
Would I say it's significant based on like patient population or women that I speak to, women that you speak to? We see it around us all day, every day.
Yep.
So it feels like, yes, it is significant. It does seem very much a problem. The amount of women who are now freezing their eggs, doing IVF, doing all sorts of treatments it seems to be much higher. And an interesting piece of that kind of fertility journey is I've had some patients and some friends go to a fertility clinic. I'm in Vancouver in Canada, if that makes a difference to this information. But they went to the fertility clinic just to kind of get the ball rolling in case they needed to go down that rabbit hole. And the first test they did was just checking their AMH level. So your AMH is your anti-Mullerian hormone, which gives us an indication, not a great indication, but an indication of how many eggs are potentially viable. And so they do this test on these women and they'll say, okay, yes, you're good. Now you're going to do this test, and you're going to like get your egg retrieval at this time. There's no conversation of, okay, this number looks good or borderline. Let's see what else we can do to prep your body to see if you could get pregnant naturally. It's a straight shoot from that first test to either, yes, IVF is an option, or no, it is not, with very little natural things that you could do in between. And that, again, people don't know that, which
that's even an option.
Obviously very unfortunate.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. That's crazy. That's really unfortunate. And that either like makes or breaks it for people and they don't even know they have other options. That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. It is at the end of the day, a business as well. Yeah. So it may be partially that.
Right.
But as we've kind of both seen, it sounds like in our conventional world, there's very little trust in the body.
Right.
And we all know that the human body heals itself. Like we fall, we scrape our knee, we don't panic. We're not like, oh my God, I need a skin graft. We're like, yeah, bummer. My knee will heal though. I know that. Our skin will regrow. So my frustration with the way our conventional world is working is that we've discounted the way the body works
100%.
On its own completely.
Yep.
And when we're working with our patients, with our clients, we're really removing the obstacles, removing kind of the bad things.
Right.
And then we're like, let's see what your body can do. And 100% of the time, I'm going to go there and say 100% of the time, your body gets better.
Yeah.
Your body figures things out. You may need to add in a specific nutrient, a specific supplement, something here and there. But really, when you take out the barriers, the blocks, the bad things that we're doing to ourselves, our body can figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of magic, that beauty. That's how mammals work. And also, I find it sad and hilarious that we have a great focus on infant health, breastfeeding, formula. We're specific about their nutrition and what they need to do for their body and make sure they grow and hit their milestones. But as soon as a human being enters school, usually age 4 or 5, all those things go out the window. And it's suddenly like, it doesn't matter what you feed them, whatever.
Yes.
And it blows my mind, honestly, in that we just suddenly forget and we end up treating our pets and our animals better than we do ourselves. And we've gone down this kind of weird path, which I think a lot of people are saying isn't working for them anymore. That's typically the people coming into my office I've tried the conventional stuff. I've tried that, or they say, I want to avoid it. But they're seeking out something else because they know they could feel better.
Right. No, 100%. I totally agree with all of that. And speaking of like not just managing the symptoms. So when we're looking at kind of what we're seeing here, like being able to do this symptom-free, which for a lot of people is a stretch, right? Like both of our experiences as teenagers, like thinking that it was possible, and the fact that, we're told that it's normal, but thinking that it's possible to have a symptom-free cycle is like, I don't even know, that can't be possible. When you're working with people, when you're working with women who are wanting to get to that point where they can trust their body, like they feel like that's a big piece of it. What are some of the things that you're implementing with them to help them get to that point where they're able to not have to deal with feeling like completely miserable during their period?
Yeah. So I use, which I call the 4 pillars of health, which I implement with really no matter what you come to me for, whether it's skin issues, digestion, hormones, like fertility, whatever it is, I implement all of these pillars of health because everything is connected. And we get so much healing in step 1, which is detoxification, which really comes down to digestion. It's amazing. I just had a follow-up with a 55-year-old menopausal woman who just did the first part of this. So she really just changed up her diet and her hot flashes went down 75% and she lost 8 pounds in a month. And she was just like, 75%. Like she was so excited about this. And this is like, we just started.
Yeah.
So that pillar 1 is detoxification, which is taking out the bad things, the inflammatory foods, and healing up your digestive system so that you can actually absorb and assimilate the nutrients that you are eating. I think most people hear that and they think, oh, that naturopath, she's trying to take away my gluten and my eggs and my dairy.
Yeah.
And I will say for a period of time, I absolutely am. Yeah. And it's only for a period of time. I myself eat all foods in moderation without issue. And my goal, my intention is always to help every other person that I'm helping get to that place. Yes, in the beginning, we want to remove those foods causing an inflammatory response in our body because something's going on. We need to fix it. We need to figure that out. And when we remove those foods and that inflammation goes down, people immediately feel better. So that's why it happens so fast. And then depending on their symptoms, the chronicity of what's been going on, how long these things have been going on, we can use some healing protocols or healing like L-glutamine, zinc, different things for our digestive system to then bring those foods back in and make sure that the symptoms don't return. The part B of that step 1 is your liver. And the liver is like the unsung hero of the body. It's doing the most ever. I'm a hyper nerd for the liver. It's helping with digestion. It's managing your blood sugar. It's breaking down your hormones that you don't need anymore. It's dealing with all the toxins, medication, drugs, alcohol, everything that goes into our body is getting processed through the liver. So we would really want to support that. And when we do that with the digestion and liver working optimally, it's like night and day with what we see in the symptom change. And then, so that's just pillar one. And we see all those great results within like a month, which is super fun for everybody. And then we move into specifically nutrition. So pillar two, nutrition. That's when we want to look at how you can use food as medicine. So you've probably touched on this as well in one of your past episodes with eating within your cycle, eating for each phase of your cycle. We can absolutely do that. And specifically for your body, because like I just said, I'm at a point where I can eat anything, not have any symptoms, not worry about it.
Right.
That being said, I eat 80 to 90% like just healthy whole foods and then eat out whenever. But we need to figure out what that picture would look like for you as the patient that we're working with. Then pillar three is hormones. It's at that time where we look specifically at the hormones if necessary. I will say in a lot of cases, steps 1 and 2 have like healed up a lot of these problems. So it's not always necessary. And at that time, we would do supplementation if we needed to. If there's a prescription that we need to, I have that ability. So that's okay. I do always want to point out as well that I like to really hold off on supplements until we get to that place where your digestive system is actually healed, because you probably see this as well as a practitioner, but we're in this sort of catch-22 position of you get the people who are like, they ask you a question, they say, what supplement? I need, what supplement can I take to fix this problem?
Yep.
Well, we can't out supplement a bad diet or a bad lifestyle.
Yes.
And also giving a supplement to a digestive system that isn't working is essentially flushing your money down the toilet.
Yeah.
Because if you have, say you have chronic diarrhea and then we're going to add in a supplement, how much of that supplement is being utilized by your body? How much is staying in your body? So that's why we want to start in the digestive system and then not add any supplements until we're sure that your body's going to be able to use them and use them properly. And so step 3 is that hormone picture. And then pillar 4 is lifestyle. It's absolutely not last. It's just, I have to say these in an order, but lifestyle is including your stress. So we really have to focus on and hone in on stress and anxiety, what that looks like for you. What is true stress and anxiety as well? Because a lot of people don't really know that the feelings of anxiety can be brought on by a sensitivity to coffee or some food sensitivities. It can be related to that inflammatory response in our body where we think we're anxious all the time, but really it's our body giving us a sign like, hey, I don't feel good. Something's not right. And so in that first pillar, when I said that we see so many results, often people will say, yeah, my anxiety went away. And so it's not true anxiety at that point. To me, that's a symptom of your body. But we really want to look at your cortisol level, your blood sugar. Those are they're holding hands in your body. They're like married. So we need to make sure those things are also regulated and normal. And then exercise. You just mentioned the episode you did with exercising for your cycle. So many women, unfortunately, are over exercising, under eating. That makes weight gain keep happening and hormone imbalance worsen. And I hate being the bearer of bad news in that end because everyone's trying their hardest. Everyone's doing their research, their due diligence, and they're like, yeah, I'm doing HIIT and I'm doing CrossFit and I'm working so hard and I'm eating so clean and I'm gaining weight. and it comes back to that balance between your cortisol, because if you're already a very stressed out person, you have a lot of stress, your cortisol is already high, and then you're doing CrossFit or very intense HIIT type of workouts, that's actually elevating your cortisol more. And when cortisol is high, that can cause us to crave sugar, and then that causes us to gain weight. So we can't ignore these other lifestyle pieces. And then sleep is the other leg of that stool, which so much of our body processes are being repaired, regenerated, rejuvenated while we sleep. So if you're not sleeping, that's a huge problem. If you're waking during the night, also a huge problem, can be related to progesterone, can be related to cortisol. So like I just said, we can't ignore any piece of this. And when we put them all back together, it's like, you feel great, you feel amazing. And it seems almost too good to be true because it's quite simple when you break it down like that.
Yeah.
But we need somebody like you or I, or, some type of person, practitioner, to lay it out like that.
Right.
Because of course we can find all this on the internet. We can find anything there, but it's generally not step by step in a a bite-sized way to implement in our lives.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck or lost or overwhelmed because they don't know what to do at that point.
Yeah. Well, it helps to have somebody to be able to walk you through it. And two, I think like you were just explaining, kind of also knowing the why behind what we're doing. Like we hear about things like, oh, we should support our liver and we should detox, but we don't really know why we're doing it. So I think understanding the why is also helpful and kind of walking through that. So switching gears a little bit, I want to kind of talk about your story and kind of how your path. I feel like, at least most of the health practitioners I have on have their own health journey that kind of brought them into this path. So I'm assuming yours might be similar. But how did you get onto this path as a naturopathic doctor? And then now, specifically focusing on like women's health and periods.
Yeah. So my path to becoming a naturopathic doctor was, I don't know, nothing special, I guess. I always wanted to be a doctor. So I always loved nutrition. I always loved science. I was pretty nerdy. I just like those things interested me. I thought anatomy was like the coolest thing ever. I've always been fascinated with our body and just how it works, how it just like does all these things without us thinking about it. So that's where my love for medicine, I think, really came from, is being fascinated by our bodies. So I did my undergrad in biology with the intention of going to medical school, but I finished and I realized I hated going to the doctor because in that time frame with my own kind of horror period story, I had hormonal migraines. And the type of migraine that I lay in a dark room, I'd put like a cold cloth on my eyes. I would just literally, I couldn't sleep because it was always right behind my eyes, but I would lay there and think, if I could just fall asleep, if I could at least fall asleep, maybe I won't wake up and I'll never deal with this again. Like it was to the point where it was just like, it just sucked. And I mixed medication. So I do not promote this. Don't do this. But I mixed Tylenol, Advil, Midol so that I could function. And I honestly, I must have a very strong liver because I never got sick from it, but it's very bad for you. And I didn't know what else to do. I still had the migraines when I was on the pill. I was put on the pill at about 17. It didn't reduce them. It didn't do anything. But that's kind of what led me to just not really wanting to be a medical doctor. Because when I went to them and said, I get these migraines, like, help me, why? They never asked why. They never did an investigation as to why this person gets a migraine. They just said, take this pill every day and you won't get a migraine. And it just didn't make sense to me. So I felt just disconnected and frankly disappointed by it. So at that point, I went down a rabbit hole of research. I looked up anything, nutrition related, science related. I went down the Ayurvedic path, Chinese medicine, all these different avenues. And I fell onto a website of naturopathic medicine. And I was like, oh my God, like that's it. For me, it was like, that was the light bulb because it's Eastern medicine and Western medicine blended together. It's to me, it's the true art and science of medicine.
Totally. Yeah.
And of really getting to that root cause of what is happening and treating from there. And so as soon as I found that, I was living in Calgary at the time and I started applying for jobs to work with a naturopath, be like their receptionist, assistant, whatever I could do. And I started working with a doctor in Calgary. And I told her about my migraines and she said, oh, are you on birth control? And I said, yeah. And she said, okay, well, your B vitamins are depleted. You need a B complex. And I was like, oh, okay. And I took that and I essentially stopped getting migraines.
Wow.
From that like moment forward.
That's crazy.
And so that right there was amazing for me on my own. And then I applied for school and my path to get into naturopathic medical school was very simple, easy. It seemed like, the right thing to do based on how easy it was. I met my business partner down there in school. We went to school in Arizona.
Awesome.
But she's actually from Canada as well. So we became best friends, probably because we were both Canadian. We were like, okay, we're best friends now. We did everything together, all our group projects with two other girls. Cool. And then she said, hey, do you want to move to Vancouver and open a practice with me when we're done school? And I was like, yeah, okay. So we moved up here, we opened our practice. How we got into women's health specifically was partially because her mom was going through menopause around the same time. So she was helping her with that quite a bit. And then one of the ways that we found to get patients in our office as a new office was by doing free talks. So we called them girls' nights. We would do talks for women that we put on for free. This is pre-COVID, of course. Fed them some appetizers, did essentially like an hour lecture on like a conversation like this, explaining what's going on, why it's happening, why you're getting these symptoms, and the relatively simple, easy way that we can balance it all back out. And then you feel good again.
Yeah.
And so it built this little community, which was phenomenal. You know, the women would chat while they were there and kind of connect together. Some would become patients, some wouldn't. And that's really how our office became like Women's Health Central, which has been really fun.
Yeah.
And then in the last 3 years, we've realized we have, again, the same conversation with most of our patients. So we took everything we do in office and we developed an online program for it so that we can help more people get better, essentially. So we have our online program that has a private community as well. So you always have that support and those touch points. One thing that's really important to me is that it's actually a program that's lifetime access. So it's not just, I want to fix your period in 3 months and like send you on your way, because our hormones as women are going to change every decade. We've seen it I'm 34. So I've seen it change from 16 to 34. And it's definitely going to change again at 44 and then 54.
Right.
So the way our hormones are changing, though, is we still go back to the basics. We still go back to step one and look at the digestion and liver support once again, and then rebalance from there. Yeah. So whether you're coming off the pill and you're trying to get pregnant, or you're coming postpartum and you just feel crazy all over again because your hormones were skewed again, or if you're in perimenopause or menopause, we can still help you, even if your starting point with us was birth control and now your starting point is menopause. Like, that's okay. Yeah. We want to be able to offer that to all women.
Yeah. I love that. That's perfect. Well, and it's such a good mix of, you know, you have the in-person clientele and then you have the online, like being able to reach people wherever they are no matter where they are. So I love that, the mix of the in-person and having the online. And then sometimes too, I think that sometimes people just want to go it on their own. Like they don't necessarily want the hand holding the whole time. So I love that you give people that option to kind of like do it on their own. So I love that. Okay. So I do have a question that I like to wrap up with that I like to ask everybody. But before I ask that question, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about you and what you do, your online course you were just talking about, your practice and all of that?
Yeah. So our online course can be found at symptom-free.com. There's a website, there's a blog, there's the YouTube channels connected to that. So you can find like loads of information there. And then TikTok is the social media platform that I use the most for it. I'm called the Period Doctor on there. And then our in-person practice is called Bay Wellness Center. So we can be found through that website as well.
Perfect. All right. And of course, I'll have all that in the show notes so I can go check it out and check out her course. So the last question I want to ask you is, what do you think is the most important thing people can do to live with purpose?
Oh, this is going to sound like a plug, but I think that to truly be able to live with our purpose and to live out our purpose with intention, I think our physical health needs to be dialed in. I think we need to feel good physically to be able to feel good mentally and spiritually. I've seen that in my own health journey as I've gotten physically very trusting in my body, feeling amazing. I've had more time to move into that mental and spiritual space. So I think to truly live our purpose, whatever that goal or intent is, if we physically don't feel good, the odds of us doing that are pretty slim.
Yeah.
Even if we feel good sometimes and then 2 weeks out of the month we feel bad, that crashes our productivity and our motivation and all of those things. So I really do think it comes down to the way we physically feel in our bodies.
Yeah, I agree. I agree so much. And And I do think I just did an interview earlier and we were talking about that, how, because, I'm a huge fan of energy work and I incorporate that into my programs and all of that. And there is like a spiritual, emotional piece. But I think people are kind of on one side or the other of the spectrum, where they're only looking at the physical parts and they're not looking at like the spiritual, emotional piece, or they're only looking at like the energetics and the spiritual piece. And then like you have to put it all together. So I agree with you. I think you have to have that physical piece has to be there for all of the whole kind of wellness puzzle to be put together. So I love
absolutely.
that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Annie, for this. This was super informative for people and living a symptom-free cycle. So I appreciate your time and sharing all of this insight and information with us. Thanks so much for joining.
Great. Thank you for having me. That was super fun.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza, or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.